It's our privilege to have amidst us a very senior professor, translator, writer, critic, and in many other ways very well qualified. She is none other than Smita Tiwari Jassal. She is associate professor in anthropology. She is working as assistant professor at the Graduate School of Social Sciences, Middle East Technical University, Ankara, Turkey. And presently she is a visiting senior fellow at the Center for the Study of Developing Societies, CSTS, Delhi. Welcome, ma'am, to the studio. We also have Professor Abdesh Kumar Singh with us in the studios. Professor Singh is the Director of School of Translation Studies and Training at IGNOU. Professor Singh is a formal Vice Chancellor. Besides, he is a keen and avid reader, critic in the comparative literature. His interests are in the translation studies, interdisciplinary studies, criticism, and also contemporary literary theory. Welcome, Professor Singh, also to this program.
Thank you.
Well, talking about the achievements of Professor Jassal, I think the list is unending, but we would like to focus on her experiences on translating folklore, especially in the Bhojpuri language area. One of her very important book which has come to the readers in the year 2012 is Unearthing Gender, Folk Song of North India. It's a very important book in the sense that it's dealing with the nature, the traits, the genre, the shades, the meanings of folk songs which India abounds. Well, I would in the initials request Professor Singh also to make some initial comments on the folklore. I think no one can deny that folklore is the integral part of the Indian lifestyle, Indian life itself. Rather, I should say that this is the essence of the Indians. So how would you, sir, comment on this?
All of us know that 21st century is century of translation. And one of the good things that happened is that translation is not limited now to literary discourse. With people like you, with your work, you have opened up the vistas of such studies through translation, and I feel that all of us in translation studies would agree to one particular fact, that translating culture or translating folklore is the most difficult task. At the same time, in India we have highest linguistic density, that means highest linguistic cultural density also. Folklore density as well. We would be interested in knowing from you as to how did you move towards the translation of folklore, at the same time your experiences, and our students would be equally keen as we are to know about the strategies of translating folklore, particularly the cultural items. We had a couple of workshops so that we make things little clear in terms of perspective or context. One workshop we had was in Bikaner, where we translated Vatas. Now these are Vartas or Bath, narratives. And second workshop was where you were also there as one of our resource persons in BHU, where we attempted translation of Devi songs. That was a kind of different experience. So bouquet of our questions or queries to you that we can interact upon would be, to begin with, your experiences as a translator of folklore, and subsequently we would discuss the other issues regarding how to negotiate important aspects, particularly strategies of translation. Ma'am.
Thank you so much. It gives me great pleasure to be here, and it's really a privilege to get this opportunity to talk about a subject that is so close to my heart. And I want to just begin by saying, you asked me this question, how did I get started on this? I was actually more than 15 years ago, I was starting some work on women's rights to land. And then I found that when I went into the field and talked to women, perhaps they didn't have the conceptual categories to talk about these things. So there was, I found that it was not always so easy to talk about abstract things like that. But I would come back and they would always sing, and I had numerous recordings of their songs. And then I began to listen to these songs, and I found that so many of the questions that I had wanted to ask them were actually in the songs.
Oh.
And then I made that a kind of like a research strategy of mine, always talking to the women and collecting the songs. Then I ended up having a huge archive of women's songs. I was living in a place where I couldn't come back for field work, and then I said, let me look at this archive and listen to everything and see what I have. And I was completely stunned to find that I have thousands of songs. I mean, over a 15-year period, I had built up this archive just because it was my hobby in the field. It was just because I enjoyed doing it. So ultimately this book came out. It's called Unearthing Gender, Folk Songs of North India. I began to work on this book by kind of listening to one recording every day and trying to tabulate and sort of keep a record of what was said in it, what kind of themes were discussed in the songs. And I ended up categorizing, separating according to theme and so on, and also translating then hundreds of songs. Then the challenge became, how do I put them into different, into kind of order and a kind of, so that a book, I knew that a book was there. Ultimately the book really talks about how integral it is to our understanding of gender to look at all this folk material, because maleness and femaleness is constructed, is socially constructed, and it is socially constructed, and the songs give us a wonderful clue about how this construction is taking place. Because however you have to be a male or a female in that particular society is there in all the songs that are there. And so then whether you look at different genres, whether it is holy songs or it is marriage songs, or it might be
for all the events and occasions,
for all events and festival songs, Sita songs, Mangal songs, grinding songs, or the work songs of women in the field, harvesting, these
very important songs.
Whatever range, whatever genre you take up, you find that there is something about the gender dimension. And that was the most fascinating thing for me to find.
It is excellent, like the way you unearthed the archive, that was already there.
It was already there.
Already there.
Right.
The need is that the researchers have to go there, do the necessary field work and construct that particular thing. Sharma ji comes from Himachal Pradesh, by the way.
Yes.
So he has access to some of those things. Issue that is there is that these songs for your book, you translated them into English.
That's right.
And most of them are Bhojpuri songs, if I am not wrong.
Exactly.
So we will be equally interested in knowing in the ways and strategies that you employed in translating some of these untranslatable cultural elements. If a certain snatch from a song or something that can be shared, that will also be equally important. Sharma ji, something about this Himachal Pradesh, again, you have different districts. Some students in the school, they are working on Ramayana, and
we have songs on Mahabharata, Holi, then the festivals, then the seasons. I was just going back to my memories, and then I found that the songs, particularly when the daughter is getting married or after marriage, she really yearns to come back to her parents' house, and then the kind of shades that are there in her song, they really need one to listen it patiently, and then layers over layers unfolds, and then you really end up, as you said, that it constructs that gender.
Exactly.
That yes, exactly, it is who and to whom the message is being encoded, and who is giving the message, or who is actually the person beneath all these words. So it's really interesting that what strategies would you like to, or
has
you have
some
applied?
work been done in the direction of collecting this
Yes,
there
sir.
in Himachal?
Yes, sir. In Himachal, I remember that the State Academy of Language, Arts and Culture has brought up about 10 compilations which are of general nature, as well as the language specific, district specific, like Mandyali,
Are they
Bhiwadi.
translated into English?
They are mostly not translated as yet. The efforts are being on, and I think if I may mention about the People's Linguistic Survey of India's efforts, I think they are doing very important work in the area of the folk songs, folk literature, and their reports actually includes the songs which are sung in that particular language area. So I think that's one very important
In fact,
initiative.
what you mentioned is also a treasure house,
Yeah.
and her model, the way
I
she
think, yeah.
worked for her research, that model can easily be used.
It can, yes, it
which
can further.
would be combination of translation plus interpretation at both the levels.
Yeah.
So
And along with it, I think it also helps to understand many other complexities of the society.
Of course.
Because folk songs are basically not just songs, but they're very important treasure of your literature, overall literature, which depicts life in all its shades.
Absolutely.
So
And
I
as you
think-
were talking, I just remembered that a scholar I came across while I was doing my work is Kiran Narayan. She's an anthropologist in the US. Hers is the only name that comes to my mind with regard to Himachal songs.
Delhi University has done some studies on the songs of Chamba. They have brought
I see.
out, but
Yeah.
of course, Chambali songs are large
Ballads.
and ballads, and many genres are there. And because in Chamba districts alone itself, there are more than 5 different languages which are spoken. So they have till now, I think, focused only on Chambyali, which are in and around Chamba city.
I see.
But I think that's one
and
initiative.
every region had its own mother goddess in
Right.
Himachal.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Again,
We have
there
the-
would be a whole lot of songs built around.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, we
Sure. I want to just talk about how, for me, I felt that the process of translating actually entailed translating an entire culture and way of life
Very true.
and thinking into a language which may lack the corresponding categories. So, for instance, I want to draw attention to one word that I found very challenging, which is achara or Anchal, or which in Hindi is translated as Anchal, but in Bhojpuri it is Achara, Achare, and so on. So this is the loose end of the sari that goes over the shoulder, and it can also be used for covering the head, and of course it is invariably draped over the bosom, covering it. But this is the very Anchal that is also spread out to receive blessings.
Yeah.
Or ceremonial gifts. Yes.
Like this.
So it is a very potent word, and I was very dissatisfied with my earlier translation of it as merely as bosom cloth. In Hindi, I guess Anchal is quite adequate, but I keep struggling with how do you convey a whole ethos in English, and that's the challenge for translation. I will read my translation. On her porch, Tikuli started brushing her tresses. Oh, was cast on her the glance of her elder brother-in-law. My husband, O Ram, but an adolescent, and this, O Ram, my respected brother-in-law. Brother-in-law goes and kills the brother, that is her husband. And so all she asks is that the fire, she wants to become a sati, and she does not want to succumb to his advances. So she asks that the funeral pyre that is going to light her husband should arise from her bosom cloth. That is the very kind of difficult, problematic kind of situation that we see here. So she says, then from my bosom cloth should arise the fire offered to the husband's pyre.
Bhojpuri version also?
I do.
I think we will.
You want to hear that?
Yeah.
All right.
That would be what it.
Gor lage bhasur ji, are karila minitiya nureki. Tani aisa kariha bhasur ji, re agya ani dehane nureki. Are sami mukh tarti nureki. Jable ke ave bhasur ji, are agya ani gaila nureki. Are tab leke ave tukli. अरे करी मिनितिया नूरे की सत के तू होई बेसामी अरे हमरी बियहुआ नूरे की अरे अगिया उठी जयती नूरे की सत के तू हैले सामी अरे घर के बियहुआ नूरे की आचरे से अगिया उठले सामी मुख तरले नूरे की. It's a grinding song. So what I learned from it was how it underlines the horror of incest, and if we may call it incest, and we may understand it as the pedagogical message that is being transferred there, the importance of brother-in-law avoidance, which is so of elder brother-in-law avoidance, which is so central to this culture, and what kind of a disgrace a woman would experience if she was to have a kind of relationship with her brother-in-law, or if she was going to encourage such attention. So not only is the veiling a sign of respect, which we understand it, but it also underlines that no familiarity is possible between an elder brother-in-law and the woman, and especially in a household where you can imagine there are a number of brothers living together, married brothers, and how the whole question of maintaining social order, everything is so deeply embedded in it. So the challenge of the translation is to bring out these nuances, which if you just translate it just as it is, then how will you know this whole background? And I sort of give this simply as an example of achara, and so all of the layers that are behind this idea.
I think this is a very good illustration.
Yes.
For those who are interested in strategies. Like in Sanskrit, when there was a challenge of translating terms, like say for instance dharma and others. So in the first part, strategy was to find out corresponding lexical equivalents.
Right.
Now, then it was realized that religion is not correct corresponding equivalence. Then the second stage was to go for semantic equivalence. Now, the semantic equivalence is also not possible in that language or culture. Therefore, third is to retain that term. Now, if I were to do it, I would have made a mistake. After listening to you, I thought that now I realize that is a mistake. Like this, achara is the typical folk term.
Yes.
For achal.
Achal.
So, since I know Hindi, so I would have certainly gone for achal and glossed it. Bosom cloth is corresponding
lot of
lexical equivalence, if at all. Inadequate corresponding equivalence. So then that wouldn't have served my purpose. Achal would not have served my purpose.
No.
Achara, which has a definite connotation, would certainly serve that purpose by retaining and by maybe glossing and by elaborating it in some sort of footnote. That's something that can be decided.
And other cultural connotations that are associated with that particular term or the meaning.
Yes.
You mentioned,
but I was equally impressed with the fluency and delicacy of idiom.
Yes, isn't it beautiful?
If a man were to translate this, it would have been harsher.
You mentioned about the word dharma, and you said that we know how to arrive at the equal or the kind of word which will really do justice and convey what it really contains. So dharma, what we know, is not religious, religion, because it comes from dhri root, which is means the one which one owns, to sustain dharan,
yeah.
that which you
Yes.
you sort of
Dharayati
dharma. So I think when we say the way of life or something like that, I think
one word cannot be adequate, right? Even righteous conduct does not fit in.
That's why
this was one example you gave.
Yes, and I actually want to say that the reason I read out that particular one was because I felt that I've tried to capture the rhythm that I heard in the original song. So in translating, I feel that if you're translating songs, to capture the rhythm as well as the element of surprise that you and emotion that you first get when listening to it for the first time, how do you capture all those elements into your translation? So that, I would say, is because you're listening to a world of emotion. This is seeped in emotion, and the challenge lies in translating the meanings as they relate to the emotions. And so I'm always trying to convey the meaning-feeling system behind everything that's going on. The other point I want to make is about listening very carefully, because I feel that this is very unconventional material for social science. It is complex, it's multi-layered, it's a nuanced map of the social universe, and it's capturing the terrain of women's lives and the communities in which they live. So all of these things, I would say was something that I discovered through the songs.
I get another lesson from this. Like, say for instance, if these folk songs were transcribed in a book,
yes,
and I were to translate them in Delhi. Now, the cultural cohabitat of these songs is dislocated.
Right.
Like these songs you might have heard in Eastern UP or in Bihar.
Exactly.
So, for translating folklore, perhaps it is always good to the habitat of the song, where a song or the folklore where it grows. And as you rightly mentioned, listen to these songs or these discourses very attentively. Only then the delicacy that you could bring in was there.
It was very important for me, what you said, this context point was very important. It depended on who sang it, in what context, because the meanings of the songs changes quite dramatically depending on the context in which it is sung. So who sang it? So I invariably asked the woman who had sung it for me to explain the meaning to me. So what meaning did it hold for her? That was important. Now, I agree that we can't always do that. Not everybody has the facility to go into the field and collect the songs. But to the extent that it's possible, it would be useful to have the context in mind. For instance, Kajli, this is the song of the field, that this is a whole variety of songs are sung by women when they're laboring in the fields, and they are called Kajli. Now, what has happened is that in our world of classical music, when the Kajli has moved into from the field to the drawing room and then into the world of classical music, this fact that it is derived from the women who are actually working in the field, this is totally effaced. Nobody knows this today, that they are actually the songs of the laboring women and they have emerged from this rhythm of work, So I think the Kajli is a very good example of how there are these series of erosions that occur when the song moves from the location where it starts.
Another issue that we often face, and since a person like you has worked so much in this area, is the issue of the fact that this is all part of oral culture.
Exactly. Yeah.
And oral discourse is fluid, or rather I would say the song that you phrase had different versions. Maybe the same lady, same woman singing this song
Yeah.
might make some changes because they are all doing it on the basis of memory. So for a person who is in fact going and doing field work to collect folk song or folk narrative, how to prepare what we should know, that at what point one should know that this is the time to freeze the text. And I shall be using this for translating into another language. So you would have certainly taken quite a few decisions. What were the things in your mind when you converted, if I can use that term, oral text or from speech to writing, so that it can be later on translated into another language or maybe used for research work?
If it was a song that was quite well known, that was a good choice. Usually I could rely on it. But then I was also looking out for the rarest of songs, which I had not ever heard. And so that was also, challenge, to find something quite rare. But as I said, I always found out from the women themselves what it meant to them. And the other experiences I had was that while women were talking about their labor and the harshness of their lives in their songs and so on, they would be having a lovely time laughing and joking. and anybody who's worked with in women's communities will realize what a sense of fun there is all the time, and the sense of community. So from that I also learned how they kind of bond with each other, and how the sense of shared community. This was extremely important, and many songs actually arose from the context of this community, and a lot of improvisation also happened in those contexts. So sometimes you also realize how creative they can be and what kind of a understanding they have of rhythm of music and tempo and all sorts of things like that. So they were kind of specialists, I felt, and I had much to learn from them. And so I kept myself really open to the sorts of songs I was hearing. And I was looking for rare songs, I was looking for common songs, and something that really told me about the culture itself. And I want to give you an example also once again, because as I pointed out right in the beginning that I talked about, I said how I had started my work collecting or trying to find out about women's rights to land. And so my initial songs were about women's rights to land. And I do want to give an example, and those are small ones, so it will be easier to read those out. And I want to move on straight away to one of them, which is so informative in terms of what it conveys about the rural universe. It says, "Je kuch arajiha e baba, adhiya hamar, adhiya adhiya jani kar beti." This is the father saying, "Sabhay dhan tohar, chutki bhar sindurva e beti, tu to jaibu kauna par." So I've translated it like this: "In all you earn, father, I stake a claim for half. Insist not on half your share, daughter. This entire wealth is yours after all. Just a pinch of vermilion, daughter. Before long, far and away you'll be gone." And I find that this is a really interesting song, because it tells you about how the sort of relief that the father is experiencing, that actually he can promise her everything, but she's actually not going to stake anything in his property. It tells you a lot about the sort of these patriarchal arrangements in which I'm very interested, and about this whole patriarchal culture, the roots of it, the deep-rootedness of these conditions. I was trying to show how the sleight of hand by which women are denied rights in the natal properties of their parents, of their fathers, and I want to also show how there is smugness and relief in the father's tone as he evokes the sindoor, because she'll not be claiming, she'll be foregoing her claims on the father's property. And then I want to move on to another one, which is also quite interesting. Har har basava katayo more baba, आंगन तमुआ तनायो रे, आज की रईन रख ले बबुल, मैं तो पौनी तेरी रे. सुनवा तो दिहा बाबा, रूपवा तो दिहा, और दिहा रत्ना जड़ायो रे. घोड़वा तो दिहा बाबा, हथिया तो दिहा, एक नहीं दिहा बाबा सर की कंघिया, सास ननद बोली बोले रे. हाँ? So I have said that what is this sar ki kangahiya? And I'm saying that it probably implies something to hold yourself, your head up high. You've got everything. Your father gave you everything, but still it is not going to give you the kind of respect and the sort of the sense of worth. This is what she's in her new family, because she'll still be the butt of her taunts from her in-laws. So even though parents have been very particularly generous and all, it will not bring her the economic independence. That's what she's asking for.
Physically strenuous thing when the whole family would sleep, that this lady will get up early in the morning and would start grinding, so that the family is able to eat in the olden days.
Right.
At the same time, she would make this strenuous activity as a catharsis, in the sense like, young lady away from her parents, so having nostalgia and all those feelings. So in her song she would be articulating that also. So this is a beautiful mixture in these songs that one finds, that they combine articulation of pain. Perhaps they don't have any space, any other space to speak about. So they sing in wilderness, in the loneliness of the morning, singing for themselves. At the same time, what one feels is that this is rich repository of knowledge, and then the kind of subtle feminist claims that are there. It may not be as outspoken. When we think of translating them, then at times they might get lost. Particularly that subtlety may be lost. How do you, as a social scientist, would look at this phenomenon? Because social science texts demand different kind of translational skills or strategies.
Yes.
I recall one Bharmari song, which is a region in district Chamba. There the city was thirsty of water because there was no water. So the queen decides that I'll do something. And then there's a whole range of narratives. She doesn't want to send her daughter to sacrifice so that the water god may be pleased and that the water is released. And what she says, that if I send my daughter, then my husband will not be able to establish good relations with the neighboring kings. That would mean that the daughter is going to be married, and then a kind of new social relationship is going to be built. And then at the same time she says that my son is very young, I can't send him because the future of my kingdom, of my husband's kingdom, would be unsafe. So she decides to go herself and then gets sacrificed, and then the water ultimately comes. So there are a lot of feelings, emotions, sacrifice that a wife or a queen can make for her subject or for her husband or for her family. So quite interesting. So I think what are these techniques which you employ to translate or express these feelings, which are very inner and core?
You just take a single genre like the grinding song that you mentioned. It's not, what I understood from it was that there is also there is a rhythm to it. Yes, it is very rhythmic in the sense that the song, the meter is it takes as long as it takes for the jata to come round in one circle. The line of the song is about that long, So yes, it relieves the tedium, and this would be the simple understanding. But there are these. What's interesting for the anthropologist is to understand what are the kinds of messages, the codes actually that are coming in. What are the various sorts of themes that are emerging?
What would be, your brief tips?
Yeah.
I would
young researchers and translators.
I would say listen very carefully and try and as much as possible, to do your own collection. And it takes a long time to make the collection, but it's really a worthwhile and very rewarding exercise.
I think we are amidst such an interesting topic, and the kind of liveliness that you have brought in this presentation. We would have loved to continue with it, but we have the constraints of time now. But before we end up this program, I would like to really thank you for making this wonderful presentation and also reciting some portions, the translations. I think our students, viewers, they will be definitely taking some important clues from this. I would equally like to thank Professor A.K. Singh. He has made the interaction very, very importantly live, especially adding his own experiences and also making the points which we would have liked to discuss in this conversation. So thank you, both of you very much.
Thank you. This was lovely.